We made this.
Hello and welcome to another edition of Pick a Disc. I am your host Matt Latham, and this is the podcast where someone picks a disc to talk about for whatever reason they want to. And today I'm glad to bring onto the podcast Rahl Giver, who's going to be talking about Blue October's Sway from 2013. There's a really good conversation through this, particularly a lot of focus on the live experience of this as well, and I'm quite really looking forward for you to listen to all this. So yeah, I'm quite looking forward to this bit of the podcast. So before we begin, this is the part where I tell you about how to follow us, etc, etc, etc. You can follow us on Instagram, you can follow us on Twitter, you can follow us on Facebook if you just search for Pick a Disc. I'm now on the brand new fangled thing called Threads, which at the moment I'm kind of posting on because it's just that it's very, very cumbersome to switch over the accounts. But I've got high hopes for Threads because it's not Twitter. So yeah, follow us on Tweds? Follow us on Tweds. So follow us on Threads and, all that malarkey. And don't forget, there's also a link to the Pick a Disc Discord server in the show notes if you want to talk about music on that. So yeah, I think about everything has been done, all the checklist has been made, so let's talk to Rahl. Okay, this is like the first time in a while I think the sun's been out over here in the UK, so I've had to close the blinds for once. I mean, yeah, it's amazing, like constantly I had like about a week, 2 weeks where I've had like kind of like a podcast kind of holiday, and I've been indoors for most of the time because it's been absolutely raining, and then the sun comes out, I'm inside, but you know what? I'm talking about music, and there's no place I'd rather be. And I've got a guest with me to talk about music. I'm not just throwing it easy. I've got Rahl Giver. How you doing, Rahl?
I'm good. What's shaking, man?
I'm very good, very good. How's the weather over in your side of the world?
Hot as hell, but apparently that's a global thing. I saw on the news. We've just been hitting global high temps all over.
Over here, it's been kind of overcast and kind of almost threatening to rain, to the point where I almost put the heating on earlier this week. That's how cold it got. So that's how cold it got. But yeah, and as always, as British as it might be for me to talk about the weather, we're not here. It's not pick a weather. It's not pick a climate. It's pick a disc. We're here to talk about music, and Rahl's brought a disc to talk about today. So Rahl, why don't you tell the lovely listeners the disc that you've picked for us to talk about today?
I brought with me a copy of Sway by Blue October.
Yeah, so Sway by Blue October, released on August 20th, 2013. We're nearly on the 10th anniversary of it, so this is just going to come out about a couple of weeks before the 30th anniversary. So so we're just before it. So if anyone's listening to this or a fan of that, I'm sorry for making you feel old. But so why have you picked Sway?
So it's kind of a larger band story, personal connection than anything with Blue October. Anybody that you talk to has a hard time picking an album. But as much as my entry point to Blue October was actually the album Foiled, Sway was really when I got to live in Blue October for the first time. And living in that started with Sway and has continued since. Like I said, I'd been listening since Foiled, and but they were touring on the Sway album was the first time I got to see them play. And ever since then, typically a bare minimum of twice a year, excluding pandemic lockdown nonsense, but even that had its exceptions because of what they did, and I can tell you about that in a minute. I make it out to go see them play, usually once in the spring, once in the fall. They usually play within about a 2-hour drive in any direction from where I'm at. And so, I I couldn't count how many times I saw shows on the various legs of the Sway tour. So, and I've actually seen, excluding the intro track, which isn't so much a song as it is an intro piece. This is the one album of theirs I have seen every song live.
Okay, so yeah, that's interesting that we've jumped to. We usually don't jump to like the live conversation before like this very early. This is probably the earliest we've ever jumped to it. But I quite like the fact that the live show seems to have a kind of genesis into your love for the band. Then is that fair to say? I mean, or is it more or less a case of this? So it was this album that came out that, and it linked into starting to see them live. Is that more accurate?
Like I said, I started listening when Foiled came out, and then right after that, or right when I started listening, Foiled was the most recent album, and shortly after, Approaching Normal dropped, and those two albums connected with me very, very heavily because of shit going on in my life. And I tend to tell and explain to anybody and everybody, Blue October tends to come into your life when you need them. Because I'll talk about it, people are like, I'm like, I get it. It's probably because you haven't needed it, because when they show up in your life when you need them, and then they just stick with you. But as far as the live stuff, going to that first show was almost pure like I had about 2 days drop notice. I saw that they were playing in Chicago, which is like 2 hours west of me, and I was living with a roommate at the time who was also a fan, and his birthday was coming up, and I'm like, fuck it, I'm getting tickets. You and me are going for your birthday. Let's go. And then after that, some life events happened, and they were playing in Grand Rapids, which is about 2 hours north of me, and went again, just a matter of, like I said, 2 months later. And after that, I'm like, yeah, anytime they're here, we're going. That's it. It's done. And like I said, typically, they come around proximity to me once in the spring, once in the fall, and on rare occasion, or every now and then, the year lands just right that I get an extra in there, whether he's doing his open book tours, or the occasional odd performance, like number of years ago, caught him dead middle of the summer at the Indiana State Fair, and the show was free with your fair admission. I'm like, woo! Last summer, actually, we went and saw them play at a tour that had been delayed for years because of pandemic. They were opening for the Goo Goo Dolls, and that was definitely a different performance for them, because you could tell it was a very tailored set list that day, or for that tour. It was outside of their dedicated shows. It was a lot more strictly the upbeat stuff and some of the poppier stuff. So,
Oh, okay, that's interesting. Quite interesting. Might delve into a bit more of that into a bit later on.
I would say I got some live stories I can tell you that hook to this album specifically. I think you'll dig.
Okay, yeah. We'll save. I think we'll save them for when we get to the live section, because I'll be interested to see that. But let's go back a bit further then to like the origin story of Blue October. Then, so you chose this out. You chose Sway because of the kind of live music connection. But you say that foiled, and that's 2006, wasn't it? 2006,
Right
2007.
about.
Yeah. So that was your first entry into Blue October. So, how did you discover them? Do you remember the first time you heard them, or?
So, a very near and dear friend of mine, and one of my podcasting cohorts, we've known each other since I was in middle school and he was in high school. We actually met when he was working at Hot Topic when I was in middle school, and we bonded over Transformers.
Of course.
And but I'm a couple of years out of high school, and my marriage is dissolved, and I'm in the process of my first divorce, and it was rough. And I was rough, and my buddy passes me a burned copy of the Foiled album, and holy hell, it just hit on every note. It was a way to externalize feeling what I was feeling and what I was going through. And then shortly thereafter, Approaching Normal came out, and just my path and that path were still in line, because it it was that transitioning from the feeling of sad and lost and what did I do wrong, to where it then very unhealthily but very naturally morphed into anger
Mhm.
and rage. And so it, like I said, it just, my path and the path of the albums followed very closely in lockstep. And the only one that along that journey that I didn't really have that connection to, so kind of the odd man out, was Any Man in America, because my first ex-wife and I did not have kids together. And Any Man in America is very, very heavily dealing with the extremely nasty custody battle that Justin had with his ex-wife over his oldest daughter, Blue. So, but after that, after Any Man in America came Sway. And Sway was kind of a closing of the book and a personal journey, and a major turning point for life for me. And um if any, if anybody has followed the band and follows the albums, because the albums aren't just him writing music to write music to, write that pop single. This is him charting his life story from front to back. And so if you listen through the discography in order, you can track his life journey, everything from falling in love to his the beginnings of his struggles with mental health, including suicidal depression and schizophrenia. And it's just a very difficult struggle, all the way through addiction and divorce and custody battle, and the lowest of lows of his lack of sobriety issues, which it's only ever mentioned once in one album, in Foiled. But he does mention the drug of choice was heroin, but he doesn't call it heroin by name specifically. But an eagle-eared listener can pick it up. It was in the song X Amount of Words, actually. I think the line was a tablespoon of feather, so, or a spoonful of feather. But in any case, Sway was a major turning point, because Sway was the first album he put out sober. And this was very much the beginning of him getting his life together and the piece that really powerfully connects for me here is learning to stand on your own 2 feet again after your life has been torn to shreds and you never saw a way out. And it's the beginning of healing. It's not the end of healing. It is very much the beginning of healing, because it is learning to stand on your own 2 feet again. And it's not learning to be happy again, but it's learning to be okay again.
Okay, so it's more or less like the parallels that you felt with the music and your own life as well. So I think you've made references to he and him, which I think is the primary songwriter, and this is Justin
Furstenfeld.
Furstenfeld, yeah, who
Yep.
is the lead vocalist, guitarist, and lyricist of the band Blue October
Yes.
that we were talking about. And I think he's like the primary songwriter as well, I assume.
Yes.
So he's pretty much the creative lead. So for
Mhm.
anyone who's listening who don't know who Blue October is, as I said, it's an American rock band originally from Houston, Texas, formed in 1995, currently consisting of Furstenfeld drummer Jeremy Furstenfeld.
That is his brother.
Okay. Multi-instrumentalist Ryan
Delahousse.
Delahousse. Apologies if he's listening.
Very talented individual.
Bassist Matt Nevesky and lead guitarist Steve Schultz.
Steve is new, actually.
Okay.
So Steve is new. In the last 10 years or so, there's been a moderately steady rotation of lead guitarists. The first time I saw them, and for a number of years following, it was CB Hudson, and CB left the band. Um, and then there were a couple, and now we're on Steve, which I don't think I've seen Steve play with them yet live. I don't believe so. I think the last time I saw them was the guitarist before Steve was still playing with,
Oh, okay. Okay.
which I saw him last time just a few months ago.
Yeah, I've got one of my favourite things actually is the timeline of members you get on Wikipedia, where you see all the lines,
Mhm.
all the lines and stuff, and some of them are quite boring, and some of them are quite exciting. And I mean, you've got three members that are pretty much like quite consistent. I think Matt Nowinski is quite.
Matt's been there for quite a long while. Ryan, Justin, and Jeremy have all been there the whole time for more than 20 years now.
Yeah, so it's this is the three that's been quite consistent. And before we talk about the album on it as a whole on its own, in terms of my disclosure, and you was quite surprised by this when I mentioned it. I had absolutely no idea who Blue October. The first time I'd ever heard of them was when you mentioned the name to me. But I don't think they had any impact in the UK at all. So
They tour over there fairly regularly. I'm trying to think. One of their live albums, I believe, was recorded over there. Actually,
okay,
I could be mistaken, but I believe so. Checking myself here. Live from Manchester, 2019.
okay. I know that I had a quick look at the officialcharts.com, which tells you how they chart and stuff. And I think the highest thing, I don't think any singles charted, but I think a couple albums went to around, the highest was around the 60 mark. So very cool, very kind of not in the mainstream. And I don't think they had any kind of like slightly known song. I think slightly known song they kind of lifted them, so they can't even be called a one hit wonder or anything that was a cool hit like some bands did. With like with that kind of fan base or to hook that kind of fan base in anyway.
Right.
I am just quickly having a quick look at the set list. So I'm quite curious to see how often they tour statistics, other statistics, concert map.
Well, you're browsing. If I can pitch a question to you, because it's always fun for me.
Yeah.
For somebody that's never heard them at all, what did you think for getting your blue cherry pop?
For some reason, I don't know whether it might have been a couple of bands or things that you might have mentioned music was for. I was kind of tense because I was expecting a metal band, like a heavy metal, but like kind of like a darker kind of metal band, and there hasn't. I think the closest we probably got to is probably Refused, but there's nothing being kind of like proper shouty kind of metal, and I was expecting that, and instead I got what was almost, well, it's very much kind of almost adult contemporary, like rock. Like rock. I mean, I think it takes a good half of the album before a distortion pedal really is found, and it's a very laid back, very kind of. And I want to say mature, but I don't mean it in like. I don't mean it in kind of like old, like music old people listen to. It's more. I don't know what the word is.
Emotionally mature.
Yeah, emotionally mature, very quite sensible. The guitar sounds are very, very clean, and what I mean by that is that there doesn't seem to be a lot of, again, distortion effects on it. So, okay. I'm sorry. The setlist.fm has loaded upon their England tours, and they played Birmingham on the 11th of March. 2022, and then played Wolverhampton in about 4 months ago. Wow, okay. So Institute
they
Birmingham.
do make the rounds on your side of the pond. So
KK Steel Mills have played in Wolverhampton. I've not been I don't go to Wolverhampton that much anymore. I used to go there quite a bit, but actually I was there up a week or so ago, for the first time in ages, but to watch a gig. But yeah, that's interesting. So yeah, they do. Yeah, so they seem to do regularly. Yeah, they regularly are over here. Um, so yeah, so the yeah, so but so they've probably got. I got a feeling it is probably a bunch of people that have found them online, or whether they have some kind of like hook, like that was caught on a soundtrack or something that I probably never caught or anything. But yeah, the venues they seem to be playing, they're playing kind of Main Room, O2 Institute, KK Steel Mills. They are pretty much in the high triple figures, almost four-figure venues. So okay, I'll
Good.
take that back. They had an impact over here somewhere. I must have been facing the other way or something.
They always seem to float just under the surface of breaking into mainstream, but it tends to feel like the right place for them because, like I said, they are so profoundly important to those of us that listen, that it feels like the idea of them being a major mainstream success feels almost wrong, almost sacrilegious
Mm-hmm.
because of the content and the meaning and the power in there. That it's something special that isn't supposed to just be this pop culture consumption thing.
Okay.
So
Ah, okay. So it's interestingly enough, I never really did live set list.fm stats on this before, but Sway is the second most represented album on tours apparently. Foiled is top, and
uh,
home third. But yeah. So let's have a chat about Sway. So a couple of things that I found in a couple of comments. So I mean, 'cause I was trying to trying to see if I can get anything that people have written about it, and there wasn't loads of stuff, so it was kind of like, as you say, kind of underneath the radar. But there was a couple of things that people said. I can't remember what site it was, but I was reading it this morning, of people commenting on this album specifically, and a few interesting people are saying like, "Oh yeah, my mom likes this band," or
uh-huh.
"Yeah, like my mom likes this band," or something, or something very similar. I can't remember the exact wording was, but when he said that, they come at the right time, or they arrive in your life at the right time. Someone mentioned in the comments around the time, like, it was like, they seem to kind of soundtrack key moments and stuff. And so when you mentioned that, it was like, oh yes, so there's a couple of people who mentioned something along those lines. But one of the key things I said as well is that this felt like either a departure or something different, or
Very
something
much
else.
so.
Something else. So, and I've for most of the episode, if I'm not familiar with it with an artist beforehand, I don't listen to anything else, so I focus on the album itself. And
Mhm.
so I've not listened to anything before this. So is this quite a radical departure for them?
Very much so. It is so much a change and a departure that the Blue October fan community underwent a name change at this point,
Right. Okay.
because prior they were formerly known as Blue Meanie, because prior to this there was a lot of anger, a lot of sad, and it because like I said, a lot of the prior albums and the prior stuff dealt with, the divorce, the addiction, the custody battle, all of which were very, very unpleasant. And but it was all stuff that was very honestly written, which made it so that those of us that were going through it connected with it, because we knew from going through that this wasn't fake. This was honest, because we were feeling what was pouring out of the speakers.
Okay. So yeah. So as you was briefly talking, I was sneakily had a quick listen to the first. Well, I started skimming through, I think, The Way to the World, which I think was on the previous album to this,
Mm-hmm.
and skimming through,
Well,
and
that's an
suddenly,
interesting one. Oof.
yeah, skimming through, and then there was suddenly like there was the distortion pedal came in very, very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of feel as if you're saying like yeah, the anger was there, but then this was like the point. where they kind of, as you said, this was the first time he was sober. So I'm assuming that this was him. What's his name?
Justin
Furstenfeld.
Furstenfeld.
Yeah,
Yep.
Furstenfeld. Kind of either growing up or
Justin,
kind
for
of
clarity, since you've got two Furstenfelds in the band.
yes. Okay. So yes. Yeah. I can't even call them Jave. I can't even refer to them as Jave because they're both. It's Justin and Jeremy. Our first one was Justin. So say Justin kind of like sober, probably having like a turning point in life, trying probably new outlook, and perhaps slightly more mature, wanted to kind of reflect that and not perhaps, as you say, delve into that anger or kind of reflect his mental state or temperament at the time. So I can kind of see that matching from that. I'll be very interested to probably have a quick dip back in the earlier stuff just to see how much of a change that is.
Oh, it's striking. To I would say, to give you or just to kind of expound on that a little bit, and I know this dips for a moment into the live category here, but one of the things that has always stuck with me, one of the shows that I went to see them play on the Sway tour at one point, in between songs, he's talking to the audience and, was talking about going into recording the Sway album. And he said, when we went in to record this, there was one rule: no songs about how fucking sad Justin is, because people only want to see you circle the drain for so long before they tell you shit or get off the pot.
Okay.
That was the rule for this album.
Oh, right. That's interesting way of looking at that. And so one of the things I was probably going to ask as well is, so how was it kind of perceived by the fan community then? Was this, so I mean, I'm assuming that the name change meant that it was either positive, because usually a massive kind of change in direction for a band, you got like all the old diehards going, oh god, they've sold out, or oh, this isn't the band that I like. But I'm assuming there was perhaps some, but I mean,
So it still comes up to this day.
okay.
But any time a new album has come out since Sway, we'll always see in the comment, and you can tell kind of where people are at in their life and in their journey, whether they're still in it or whether they're coming out the other side and healing. You can tell in the comments when they're talking about a new album that's just dropped, by looking for the ones that are like, I don't like this one. It's like, I want the old stuff back. I want the angry stuff. And you can tell where they're at, because they want the angry stuff, because that's what they're still connecting to. They haven't moved forward yet. And I understand it, because, I don't fault them for it, because that's the thing that you've got to go through to process before you can come out the other side of it. There's not a
Yeah,
way around it.
yeah, I think yeah, I think it's quite interesting, and this is something that's been talked about and referenced on many different episodes in the past about bands kind of changing their sound or anything. In that, there's a point where I think musicians kind of want to evolve or want to perhaps delve or explore other avenues, or other sounds, or kind of evolve, and either they'll have the energy or the temperament to do what they've been doing for so long. They might look back and think, I might either be slightly embarrassed or or just feel like, oh, I was a different person when I wrote those songs. I don't want to tap into that anymore. And I think, yeah, and I think perhaps the key part of as I say, good band, or a band that's probably in tune with its fans, for example, is that they know when the fans are growing up with them. So when the changes are starting to happen, that they realise that the fans are getting older. At some point, the fans are probably going to be too old to be able to jump around in the crowd the whole time. They'll need to kind of relax for a second, but
I'll tell you, you go to a show and you will see the complete spectrum of age range at any of their shows. I mean, you see people in their 60s and 70s, and you see kids that are that their folks are bringing. But I've seen parents bring 8 or 9 year olds to like open book shows, which are it's his acoustic tour that he does. So it's more mellow and more laid back, but you know they'll still bring the kids.
Hmm. That's interesting. I wonder. So I was so if you told me this was the from the sound of this, I could see it appealing to the old generation more. Old generation because of the calm. It's not like the kind of angry music that they use or listening to. Is it fair to say that this won them a slightly older age range that perhaps wouldn't have gone into the more angrier stuff, or do you think, or was there a still?
I don't think it's an age range so much because everything that they cover throughout their entire discography is not bound by an age or a generational experience. It's a human experience. And from Sway forward, that experience is very much about making yourself it's about putting yourself back together when you've fallen apart in one way or another, be it, like I said, for me, it was going through my divorce. And, but for many, 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 many more people, it's very much the connection point is the issue of addiction and sobriety. And I cannot begin to count how many people, all I can tell you is that you ever go to a show, you will instantly run out of fingers and toes to count the number of people that when you talk to them will tell you the exact same thing, almost word for word. They saved my life.
The kind of ideas and themes of addiction kind of, well, they are pretty much universal across a whole different age range of people with so many different experiences. It's like, so I'm assuming it's like counting the AA chips or counting the sobriety chips being flicked in the air and stuff. And yeah, not to make light on, yeah, I'm not making light of it. I think it's a case that it's quite interesting that they got that shared kind of community aspect, that kind of like shared experience that, as you said earlier, and I think it's a nice kind of roundabout way to go back to what you said at the very start, in that people say that they show up at the right time for people's lives. So I'm assuming that people have connected with the band, perhaps with different albums, at different stages of either recovery or life events, and they stuck with them. And I quite like that as a theme. I don't know whether you can probably say that about quite a few different bands, but I don't think there seems to be a band, or not aware of a band whose identity appears to be emotionally connecting with like fans on that kind of level, or at least where it feels like it's linked to that. So I think that's quite a nice way of seeing it, I think.
Justin talks very frequently about how sobriety has become the number one priority in his life. He's like, I will never, ever go back to being that person again. And it is so ingrained in him, and he knows that it is so important to the people that come to his music, that come to their music, that this is a semi-live conversation, that during the pandemic lockdown, when concerts weren't a thing, and there was something else that wasn't a thing, was AA meetings, NA meetings, all of that. That wasn't a thing. So those two things weirdly came together by way of Blue October, because during the lockdown, at the beginning, they started doing some acoustic shows on Stage It, if I remember correctly. Yeah, Stage It. And they got to a point where they were like, we're going to be doing more of this. And there's some things about Stage It that don't work well for us. And so they put a couple of their guys on it and had them build out their own dedicated streaming platform service called Get Back Up TV. And all the Stage It concerts eventually made their way over there for purchase, as well as more shows that were done after the launch of Get Back Up TV, and filled it up with a bunch of other stuff that was free as well. But one of those big free things was that weekly he would do like an hour to 2 hour live stream, taking people 1 week at a time through each of the 12 steps of the 12-step program.
So he was kind of channeling his music into kind of like exploring, he said, the 12-step program, but also to help people that might be at those different stages. Wow, okay. That's
He's no fool. He knows exactly why so many people come, because that sobriety is a big thing.
And I think
and it runs deep in the music.
Thing about it, I mean, with the whole kind of pandemic and the lockdown being perhaps quite emotionally taxing world, that it's probably not only perhaps it was probably helping him as well, just to be able to keep sane and keep productive and to give people something to look forward to at certain points. I mean, there's a kind of like a singer-songwriter that I know I've seen a few times over here called Gaz Brookfield, did live in the lockdown every Friday night for an hour, every Friday for at least 60 to 70 weeks. Every Friday, live stream on Facebook. That what usually happens, it would be him, it would be my friend Ben, who opened up at 6 o'clock. There'd be another guy called Jake who did 7 and 8 o'clock. Gaz would then do something. But that was every single week. Every week it'd be live stream from everyone, and you'd see the same names chatting to people, and having that kind of community, giving them people something to look forward to during the week, and to be able to kind of one, combat kind of like music, or to at least give something to hold on to, or something to count on, and a familiarity, particularly in this very unfamiliar time. And that's the kind of mindset I really quite enjoyed, and I've seen other musicians do it, through Instagram, through other kind of streaming services and everything. So yeah, I've always thought it was quite good that the artist did that, and yeah, I mean, and all for props for Justin for doing that as well, but kind of making his own kind of streaming service to do it at the same time, rather. So full respect to him for doing that.
I mean, and like I said, and they went whole hog too, because it started with, okay, we can put this together on PC and desktop, and then the mobile app, and then it started rolling out to where you can get all the rest of your streaming services. It's on Roku, it's on Amazon Fire, it's it's basically anywhere you can download a streaming app. And all those past live streams, all those 12-step streams, those are all still there. They're all still free.
Yeah,
there's no monthly subscription to get into access those. That's free.
Yeah, I'm just having a look at it now, look at the site now and stuff, and it's pretty good, pretty good. And it's basically telling you how to connect it through all sorts of different ways. So you can connect through Roku, you can connect it through Android and Apple Macs, and through an app and everything. You can cast it to your screen and stuff, and it's I'm quite impressed. I wasn't expecting to have someone who invented their own kind of streaming service over the pandemic for that. But
bonus points for the streaming app too on mobile.
Yeah,
because they have set it up so that you can actually turn it on, kick on the audio, and shut off your screen and just listen.
Nice. Yeah, YouTube doesn't. Well, the free version of YouTube doesn't.
Premium will let you do it, but free, no.
Yeah.
But anything and everything on Get Back Up, you can just listen.
Yeah.
On your phone.
Yeah, wow. Yeah. I wish apps did that more. But
tell me about it.
Yeah. And I think one of the things I want to briefly mention about.
Hear that, Netflix? Get on it.
One of the things I kind of want to mention as well, that something else that perhaps not really talked about on this podcast as well, is that this album was funded by Pledge Music, which doesn't exist anymore. It actually went bankrupt, and how the way it ended was a bit. I've known a couple of bands that kind of lost money after it after it ended.
Oof.
When because of just basically because of the company collapsed. But it was one of the earlier instances, along with perhaps Kickstarter,
Mhm.
of crowdfunding music.
Yeah.
Yeah, and being able for fans to be able to kind of pay to kind of pay to support artists in
Mhm.
like costs to kind of record and produce and stuff. Did you did you pledge for this or?
I did not. That was going on before I started going to the shows because, like I said, I started hitting the live stuff and really just immersed myself and never came back up for air again during the Sway tour after the album had dropped. Now my buddy who introduced me to them many years ago now did, and as part of that, he actually has the commentary album as well, which he hasn't done a lot of, but there is one of the more recent albums, not the newest, but Fight for Love, which came out, I want to say about a year or so into the pandemic. There is the commentary version of that album available on YouTube Music as well.
Okay.
So,
Okay, so have you listened to the commentary version?
for Sway, I have not gotten to. Fight for Love, I have, and that's one that honestly really deserves to have that commentary album because on its surface, it sounds like it's very much about one thing, namely a person, but it's not. It's very subversive of the expectation in that regard because as much as it sounds like he's talking about a person, he's very much talking about his mental illness and his mental health. And it's very that album was very much about not only learning to live with and accept that part of yourself, but learning how to romance it.
Okay. Okay.
And knowing that completely flips that album on its ear.
Ah. Okay. Okay. That's probably one I might have to check out a bit later. I'll check it out later days. Um, but but I think the idea of kind of the pledge music and the crowdfunding stuff, I think, is always kind of like a good idea to help again to support artists. I think I've not done many. I've only done a couple. I've perhaps helped kickstarted. I remember kickstarting. I'm pretty sure I kickstarted Veronica Mars season 4, or no, the movie, Veronica Mars movie. I remember
Okay.
putting because that was a Kickstarter at some point. Um, have you ever took part in a pledge for or Kickstarter or anything along those lines?
My limited rapport with Kickstarter stuff tends to be in video games.
Okay, so
So that's where a lot of my money goes. And even more so because I'm very big on the indie game scene because that's where my bread and butter genre of choice tends to live and die, which is the Metroidvania.
okay, yeah,
So,
yeah. For my own sanity and for the lack of and for time, because I think it is 6:30 here, and at some point in the next 3 hours, I might need to eat. We we that right, it's we'll avoid the indie game tangents. I have a whole other
I didn't mean
podcast.
to take it that
Yeah,
way. I really
yeah,
didn't.
yeah, yeah.
You
But
asked, it happened. I'm sorry.
yeah. But no, I have a whole other podcast dedicated to kind of like indie games or storytelling games that I can go down into. But yeah. So just to avoid us talking about games for three
You and
hours, we
I
might
should do
actually.
that one sometime too. We'll have some fun.
Yeah, we might be actually. I think really discussions for something that,
Uh-huh.
that yeah. But podcast plug there for another one of my podcasts coming soon. Anyway, but yeah, music of course. But when you think of this album, so let's move on to some of the songs. Which songs jump out at you when you think of this album?
So I know the one that jumps out for most because it was the big song on this album, but that's not the one for me because the addiction and sobriety thing, very fortunately, was something that I didn't end up having to go through and dealing with myself. I teetered kind of close to it going through my divorce, but I never quite made it to the bottom of that bottle. Well, I may have, but I crawled back out pretty quick. It was a very short stay. But the like I said, the big one for most people on this album is fear. But it's not the one for me. It's it's not broken anymore. That's that's the one for me. The one that says that to me that after everything, I thought I lost half of myself, but I didn't. I'm not broken anymore. I wasn't broken to start with. I let myself get tricked into feeling that way, but I'm a whole person all on my own.
So it's a song that's like kind of soundtracks the kind of like the end of a stage or an epiphany, so to speak, where like you think, okay, I'm either not as damaged as I thought it was, or I've managed to get to a point where those parts or fracture parts of me are slightly either whole or have formed to make something new, to make a new whole or something. And yeah, I think not broken anymore, which I think is quite an apt title to kind of soundtrack that thing. You might not be the same person you was or that you're aiming to, but you've kind of gone to a new kind of self-contentment or a new phase in self-realization or something. And so I've had other songs by other artists that kind of have a similar impact to me on that. But
It connects very heavily to that concept of learning how to stand on your own 2 feet again and do for yourself.
yeah, very much as well. And like there's like keyboard. I think it's keyboards, like almost ballady, like beginning as well, where you kind of like the introspective sound for this, which I think kind of like feels like it's if not the centerpiece of the album, it's more or less a song that kind of helps contextualizes as you said, the creative decisions of the sound that he's done in terms of he feels more mature. He's gone through stuff. It's the first time he's sober, and he kind of helps, kind of at least in a audibly emphasize that kind of tone that he's aiming to go for it.
I say I did something that I very, very rarely do before we sat down to kick up this recording is I laid in bed, I put in my earbuds, and I put on the album and did nothing else and just listened all the way through because normally for me when I get new music, I'm I'm pumped to listen to it, but it usually goes on while I'm doing something else, be it while I'm at work or I'm driving or whatever else. And I don't have a problem consuming it that way, but I'm like, you know what, we're talking about this in depth, and I wanted to take some time to really, because it's been a while for me with this album, because like you said, this is 10 years ago now, almost, and just to get lost in the soundscape of it and in the mental picture that comes with it. And one of the things, just in terms of that soundscape, that I think really reflects what you're saying there, that sound, is that to me, it feels all at once spacious, ethereal, and on the water. And visually in my head, you very much see the light, the dawn break through the clouds after the storm is where this album lives. And it lives very much.
Yeah, there's I was looking at song facts, and there's a few things that are about on this as well. Because for example, there's a section here where he goes, Furstenfeld considers this emotional ballad to be the most personal tune on Sway. That's the first song I attempted to tackle when I found this new way of life, he told Radio.com. It means so much to me because I wrote it for my wife, what she did for me, and all the things she empowered me with. I didn't want to write complex songs anymore, continued Furstenfeld. Not on this album, at least. I wanted to write songs you could get after one listen. It wasn't about how sad I am. It wasn't about how much turmoil I was in. It's just giving thanks. So when I hear Not Broken Anymore, just makes you remember all the things I put my wife through and how she stood up to me.
Now I'm gonna bounce songs on you for just a second, but it hooks. I promise that I wrote it for my wife and all the things. There is a song on this album that is a part of the 12 step, and it's apologizing to the people that you've hurt. And that song on this album is Bleed Out. And there is, I'll send you a link. You can stick it in the show notes if you feel so compelled. But I was very, very fortunate to be rendered speechless at the first open book show I ever got to go to. And he closed the show with Bleed Out. And all night long, it's just him in a rickety wooden chair, an acoustic guitar, and a microphone in this beautiful, intimate room in Illinois, like brick and wood paneling and twinkle light in the rafters and like the fairy curtains, and but he finishes the night, he puts down the guitar, and he stands up and walks away from the microphone, walks to the front of the stage, and he belt Bleed Out. No sound system, clear as a bell, and see that he feels all of the hurt that he put Sarah through and how sorry he is. And my God, it's the full recording of that song at that performance that was taken off of my phone. I was lucky enough, we had front row, front and center. That video is no Zoom. That was literally where he was at.
Yeah, I can pretty much see. I'll make a note to put it in the show notes. Actually, I'm gonna write that now before I forget. Show notes, YouTube video, because future Matt will forget it. Future Matt's an idiot. But yeah, I'm seeing it now, and I can guess it. I mean, I can almost feel that kind of impact he probably would have had standing there as well. You're pretty much right in front of him, and he's belting out that song, and that song, which obviously also feels like it means a lot to you. So yeah, the fact that you've got that kind of memory and that to go through, I can envision that kind of memory kind of sticking with you and going into, and again, linking back to what you said about the kind of live aspect being a key part of why you picked this album as well. You've got those key memories for this.
A lot of them.
I'm quite a few. Yeah, I like quite a few times in my own kind of gig going experience where I've seen favorite bands or artists perform certain songs that have kind of blown me away. I can see this is like a very key moment, very strong, memorable moment, and thanks for giving me the YouTube video. It does feel like it feels as if you're able to kind of, it's quite rare though, able to kind of see from your perspective or the guest perspective that live moment stuff, and I'll need to put it out because it does convey, as you said, that power, and like that closing kind of also a good closer for a set as well.
You couldn't get a better closer because you'll hear on there that at the end of that, just an entire room full of 200 people, not just speechless, breathless. All you hear is just the ambient hum of the room for a brief moment at the end of that song before he says, "Thank you, good night."
Yeah, I think I've only got it very quietly, but even though I'm quiet, I can hear him. But I say, I've only got it very, very quietly, so I'm not overpowering when you say to me. But I can't hear anyone singing along, or like everyone seems to be quiet, dead respectful, almost like quite either a mixture of, I'm assuming, either surprise or kind of in awe, because in awe about what's happening and stuff. So it's so I can Yeah, I think it. Yeah, I'll have to listen. I'm gonna probably sit down and watch that video properly, all the way through with the volume up properly. But that looks like it was a moment.
You could say that,
So yeah,
but
but yeah. So what else do you want to? What song do you want to move on to next?
so um, I will freely admit a lot of these have live conversations to them, but one
No, yeah, feel free.
um, Debris. Oh my God! If you're ever looking to explain to somebody or show somebody what it means to pour literally everything, your entire self, out on stage and leave it on the stage, Debris. Just this is one you where it definitely has some of that crunchy, angry feel, but not angry, more just aggressively feeling that emotion of kind of lost in your own emotional ocean. You know, that being that floating piece of debris. And to see him play this live, and to catch a peak performance of this, I've watched him wail this song for a solid almost 10 minutes, and you will see him get at the end, and to borrow a quote from one of the We Made This promos, um, self-indulgent, noodly fucking nonsense. Uh, I don't think it quite gets to the territory of nonsense. Maybe a little self-indulgent, but Jesus, I've watched him get on his hands and knees on the stage, down to the pedal board, working the effects, and you just see sweat pouring and you see like every muscle tense, and that he could not be any more, not just in that place and in that moment, but in that feeling. Like, holy, like it radiates an energy that makes you feel like you need to take a step back, like you were too close to
Mhm.
something dangerous.
Yeah, or something that at least you. Yeah. So like he's kind of inviting you into his emotional state at the
You
time,
you
and and he almost feels slightly perverse that he's allowing you that openness
It's not only that,
to a point. Yeah.
but in that openness, you were exposed to the the turmoil, the disorder, the disconcordance that's going on inside, and it's unsettling.
And I'm guessing as well that because you've got someone's on the opening, the audience that have shared or have similar experiences to him are probably starting to see a mirror of themselves, like are starting to see themselves in this, and like it's almost inviting the audience to confront that same emotional state and get that emotional reaction from the audience, and becoming coming in sync with the artist.
Very much so.
Yeah.
It's oh, I've seen him end shows on that, and oh,
Oh, so
the memory alone
the closed sets with
gives
this.
chills.
Oh wow, that's again that's a very interesting close. So like full band shows is closed with Debris. You said that's a very interesting because it doesn't scream set closer to me.
Now, they'll come
It
back out
feels
for
like
encore, but that I've seen him close main sets with Debris.
oh, I can probably see it. Okay, I can probably yeah, I can probably see them perhaps walking off as like those last few notes are playing off,
And it's interesting because
be encouraging.
it almost gives you permission to feel like it's okay to walk away touching that disordered part of yourself. That it's not something that needs to be locked in a box and kept away. It's okay to touch that. It's part of you.
Yeah, and I think, and and I've always felt this is kind of healthy, and I've always thought this was healthy and kind of good in the long term for the emotional slash mental well being. But when you hit on something that matches or seems to unlock or explain something within you that you couldn't fully explain, so when you're talking about that openness, it feels as if it's like, I would say I've not had this with this album particularly, but I've had it with other albums and other albums that I've spoken about on like some Matt Peak episodes, but where like you suddenly listen to something and it unlocks something and you're like, crap, this is explaining me better than I could ever explain myself, and this is what's coming back at me. So yeah, I think I totally get what you mean, where it seems to be like inviting people to kind of assess themselves through the medium of Justin's own life and stuff. And yeah, as you explain that, that feels like it's, I can see the argument for it being a kind of set closing, because it kind of ends with like a metaphorical slap in the face of like, this is who you are, but you're not alone. You're not alone. But yeah, take comfort in that.
I say, for me personally, I don't know if I would say it's that slap in the face, but it's definitely that acknowledgement that it's there. I don't think it never quite feels like it's forcing you to have that look.
Yeah,
Like it's never feels like it's trying to grab you by the back of the head and rub your nose in it. Go, look at what you've done. But it says, I'm here with you. We'll do it together.
yeah, yeah, definitely, definitely. Where do you want to move on to next?
So I wanna pop over to Sway, because oh my God, what a way to open an album. Because you get through this intro that's very airy, very breathy, literally called Breathe. It's Over is the intro track. And then the first song, Sway. And you feel like it creates this emotion of the doors to this grand, but somehow intimate and private ballroom have swung open in all their majesty, and you just see grace flowing across the dance floor with Sway. And it grabs you by the hand and
Yeah,
says, you're going to come dance with me tonight. And just to get swept in that, to open an album like that.
yeah. I mean, yeah. So this, I mean, 'cause it is like the first proper song, second tracks after the intro. This was the one that kind of like, I put it on in the back. I put it on like in the background when I thought, okay, I have an initial listen, but I'll have a deep listen later on, and like put it then because I was again expecting some kind of heavy, like metalish kind of like almost. But for some reason, I was expecting something along the lines of clipping the glass jaw at one point. So that's how I knew nothing about this. And then that clean guitar comes in, and it's that, and it's the grabbed her by the hips and hand, and it's very soft thing, and I'm like, okay, this was nothing that I was expecting. Um,
For anybody that was following them up to this point, it wasn't what anyone was expecting either.
oh, okay.
Because, like I said, everything prior to this was a lot of hurt and a lot of anger and a lot of sad. And I still wouldn't say that it hit metal territory, but you definitely hit the hard rock stuff in just the last couple albums before this, be it Foiled, Approaching Normal, and Any Man in America. Especially as things just got worse and worse and worse, which Any Man in America has that song, by the way, that you I think unwittingly referenced, where, you made a mention of, I was this is past me, and I'm now me is embarrassed that I wrote this. There is a track on that album that he's literally said those words in regards to, and it is actually the song "Any Man in America." It was the album right before this, and he's like, "Yeah, no, I don't play that anymore. I'm embarrassed I wrote that. What the fuck was
Mhm.
wrong with me?"
Yeah, but I think really quite like, particularly the first verse. I really quite like the imagery that it's coming through as well, where it's kind of like where because I was trying to figure out whether it was a positive or introspective song because it feels like it's kind of reflecting on a lost happy memory that's perhaps not as happy anymore. But I like and I quite like the kind of dichotomy of the kind of almost like romantic kind of tone, and then it gets shifted quite easy with some of the language it's used. I grabbed her by the hips and hand, then off we went across the sanded floor, and he said, "If that's not sand, it's salt. You'll get worn like we did before." And I'm like, "Ooh, that's a bit of a."
Mm-hmm.
That's like it goes. So it's like, "Oh, is this a very? Oh, this sounds like a very gentle song. Oh, no, actually, it's a bittersweet memory." And then he kind of sets the tone for the rest of the song, where he kind of so the rest of the song is a lot more kind of about a kind of happy memory, but that introductory kind of phrase about the salt kind of gets you kind of what he's actually aiming for. And yeah, I think it's quite a very clever way of introducing that kind of basically getting you to think of that song in that way. So yeah,
So, but just like I said, that breathy, airy, elegant, graceful movement just sweeps you up. And to to jump forward in order, actually, I think the next one that's worth touching on is Angels and Everything, because in terms of sound, it follows that so stunningly. And it honestly kind of breaks my heart that I only ever got to see that song live once. It doesn't get played anymore. Um,
uh,
but it's a gorgeous song, and I somewhere I think that song just got lost by everybody. But I'm like, that song deserves so much more love than it got, because it's looking for the good.
I say I'm conscious of the time. There's a couple of songs I'd like to
Mhm.
I think ask you a couple of questions, and with the added context of what you've been telling me over the past hour, I think it's quite interesting. So, like, I think I'm talking about more some of the songs in the latter half of the album
Mhm.
where like when I first listened to it's the distortion pedals coming through now, and it's a bit more perhaps of what I was expecting firstly, but still with the kind of more contemporary rock vocals rather than kind of angry, shouty stuff. So, like for example, "Light You Up," I think I really quite liked "Light You Up."
Ooh,
Yeah.
yes.
So, so that's the one so that's the one that's got more kind of like a more rocky, more distorted, louder sound. And is this a bit more like their earlier stuff? Is that
Um,
fair to say, or?
Honestly, I think if you wanted to find one on here that's more close in sound to some of the earlier I mean, Light It Up has some of that as well, but in terms of what you're talking about and almost looking for, would be like Hard Candy. Because Hard Candy is really that first one on here that goes crunch. I mean, God's sakes, it's in the name. It's hard candy. It crunches. And but Hard Candy was really kind of the first time that, and I know I just jumped off of Let You Up. Um, but Hard Candy was the first time that you got that aggressive sound
Mm-hmm.
of some of their old stuff that had that aggressive sound, but without the anger. Because, I mean, if you want to find some comparison points in some of the older stuff, I would take you back to Approaching Normal, stuff like Dirt Room, which, oh, um, Say It, also on Approaching Normal. And there's actually two versions of that album. There is there's the regular parental advisory, and there is an edited version of that album. However, there is one glaring difference between the two, and that is the final track was changed. Because on the edited album, there's a song called Graceful Dancing that album finishes with. But on the unedited, it ends with a song called The End. And for anybody that's trying to put together a playlist of how to like check this out, I highly recommend listen to their discography in order. But when you get to Approaching Normal and you're building your playlist, use the unedited album version of Approaching Normal and then add Graceful Dancing after The End. But The End is not only that like rock, aggressive, dark, that song is so messed up it could not be edited. It had to be removed. You cannot edit that song, and not for like profanity, but for the literal subject matter, the content. Like that song got drug into court when it came to custody battle stuff and used against him. It's dark. It is unbelievably unsettling. And it's not just normal to feel, you should expect to feel very unsettled listening to that song in a very perverse way. But Hard Candy, though, hits that kind of like rock sound, but without the anger and the rage. It's more, I'm rocking because it's fun and this feels good now. And then from there, Put It In, Light You Up, Things We Do at Night, kind of dial the audio aggression back a little bit, but still kind of keep you in the feeling.
Oh, okay. Yeah. I'm getting... You're doing better. I mean, we are talking about Sway, but you're doing a very decent job of getting me to try and look into some of their earlier stuff. I'm going to say that. But if we go back to Light You Up for a second, I mean, this is probably the one I kind of left out to me, mainly because of the kind of like the distorted stuff, and to the point where like there's the not middle A, but the kind of there's a rap verse in it, and I triple check. This was like a year before I really got into, a year or two before I got into Vessels by 21 Pilots, which I don't know if you've listened to the
21
album.
Pilots, I know.
Yeah.
Not super familiar, but I know some.
Yeah. This was a time before they went dubstep, and where they went kind of yeah. At this point, there was very much like if Brandon Flowers from The Killers was rapping, and this kind of reminded me a little of that. And I was like, and yeah. So that kind of suddenly like rap verse suddenly got me kind of like, oh, I need to listen to this song again. I quite like this kind of sound and stuff, and he kind of reminded me of that kind of that album bit, and that kind of sound where it was kind of mixing a few different genres, and how he kind of flipped into a kind of different way of singing and threw in that kind of rap verse and stuff. And that mixed in with the kind of distorted kind of guitars that go through and stuff. I was like, okay, it doesn't fully sound like it belongs on the album on the first listen. I think lyrically it does. Lyrically it does, but I think again with the context of what you told me, this is kind of him kind of balancing who he was and perhaps the sound of what he's been used to with this new outlook. So he's kind of like balancing out of what he wants to do with mixing in and trying to, okay, how do I incorporate the sound that I've done in the past with this new outlook, which bands have done
Sure.
since the end of times, for like the end of time and stuff. But I really quite liked Like You Up. I thought it was pretty good, and it kind of leads into the next one, which I think is this Things We Do at Night, which kind of leapt out to me. I think mainly because I thought the chorus kind of like is a bit of an earworm.
Oh, I have a I have a special story about Things We Do at Night. So, and it's a wonderful song. It's a God, it's a lot of fun live. And I'd seen it live numerous times already. But we were at a show and we were about two people back from the rail. And throughout the night, um, Justin got off the stage onto the audience floor and then climbed up onto the rail and was literally leaning into the crowd. Um, and on multiple occasions, he was literally like holding himself up on the rail on my shoulders. Like I've got video of some of it, including one where he's singing so in my face you can literally look down the back of his throat and see his fucking uvula going. I'm not kidding. It's not an exaggeration. That video exists. But towards the end of the night, uh, they're doing Things We Do at Night, and it was one of the few I didn't have my phone out for, which I don't get my phone out for shows anymore. I've reached a point where I'm like, no, I just want to be in it. And so I didn't have my phone out, and I was so not ready for it or expecting it at all. But he was back up on the rail and holding himself up on my shoulder and just belting out the song when he puts the mic to my face for me to sing. And God bless, like I said, I got no video of. However, there was somebody, few people over, that did. And we talked briefly, but I couldn't get a signal to try and ping him on Facebook to have him send it over. And over the course of the next several days, by way of the fan community, which, like I said, this was the album where it went from the fans referring to themselves as Blue Meanies to Blue Family. And but by way of that community on Facebook, I was able to get in touch with him and track him down, and he sent me that video. So I have that video to go with that memory of being handed the mic to get to sing.
Wow, that's great. So I think before we, so I think we'll have to move on to the last bit now. Is there any song that you definitely want to talk about that we haven't mentioned yet?
Yes, and I'm going to glance on it because this one does not have the connection for me that it does for most that
Okay.
are Blue Family, and that's Fear.
Okay.
Fear was the big song on this album because Fear was the one that spoke to everybody that's holding a sobriety chip, that's going to those meetings, that says that you are bigger than this monster inside of you, and that no matter what, you have the power to never let it get the best of you again. We actually have this is going to sound goofy, but it's legit official merch even. But we have a shower curtain that has the image of the giant rock on the beachfront with the ocean behind it from the video, and it's got all the lyrics to Fear on it.
Okay.
But it is a powerful song, and I've taken many friends to many shows over many years, and I've watched almost every one of them weep, just cry, hearing that song.
Okay. I can definitely feel that, particularly if it's played live as well. Again, very similar to other songs on this. Like, there's a very feeling of kind of gradual power or building up to kind of emotional crescendo through that, and I can totally understand how that would provoke that reaction out of people, but fear and stuff. So yeah, briefly talking about the reception of the album. I couldn't find a Pitchfork review of it, which was slightly annoying. there is actually someone who tried. There's actually in suggested bits now. I don't know whether it's Google has now detected and tracked that I keep looking for albums at their Pitchfork reviews to look at the scores, but it looks like people have been trying to find in the past a Pitchfork review of this, which they haven't done. But I can't really find much in terms of like critical kind of reviews and stuff. There's been there's a lot of kind of like fan kind of comments and stuff and that I found, and it's a bit mixed between people that kind of like this or like the earlier stuff and everything like that. But in terms of charts, all I've got is that he got to number 1 in the top alternative chart in the US, number 2 in the independents, 3 in the rock albums, and on the Billboard 200 he got to 13. So I'm quite amazed that it didn't get any higher in the UK. But again, they might have just not had the traction to try and push a bit more of a mainstream stuff. But even though they seem to be having, as we said earlier, being able to play some of the bigger rooms in venues. So this is usually the part where I ask if you've ever seen them live, but I think we know the answer. But no, I think yeah. But I say,
I tell you what, let's fill that if you're okay with it. I'll fill that gap with just a quick personal story that isn't necessarily hooked to Sway specifically, but is a live story.
Yeah. Oh, please do. I love live stories.
So, buddy of mine, for a number of years, I told him, I'm like, bro, you got to come to a show with it. It's like nothing you've ever experienced. It's like no other concert. And so after a couple of years, finally got him to go. We got a couple of friends together, actually. And they were touring on the Home album, which was immediately after Sway. And Home was very much the logical progression because where Sway is, learning to stand on your own 2 feet again, Home is finding happy. And we rolled into the show, and the openers are done. The walk-on music kicks on, and for many years they've actually used "To Be," which is the outro track on this on Sway, as their walk-on music. To this day, you'll still catch them doing it. Not every show anymore, but it still comes up. And out walks Justin, and you can just see happiness radiating from this man who walks out in white sweatshirt, white sweatpants, and he's out rocking in his socks. I shit you not. There's a man who you look at him and go, that motherfucker is happy to be alive and here. And just an unbelievable show. And so, and like I said, any of their shows are like nothing else. The energy of, several hundred to a couple thousand people crammed in a room with that powerful of a shared experience creates a feeling that cannot be replicated. But after the show, we made our way out, and Ben and I got outside and parked ourselves up against the wall outside the door and watching the people pour out. We both lit up a cigarette, and I looked at him and said, so, all these years, was it as good as I promised? He says, no. Better. And after years of hype, that should tell you something.
Oh, okay.
If you can go.
I'm going to have to keep an eye out and see when the next time here then, because I'll be interested to see how they perform some of these stuff live.
So.
And as I found out, they're here often. Okay, so again, we briefly this. So, very, very briefly, people who've listened to Sway and then they think, oh, I'd be interested to find out, listen to more Blue October. Where do you recommend they go to next?
Honestly, if Sway is your inroad, follow the road. Go in order. And I tell anybody, honestly, you really owe it to yourself. Listen to the complete discography in order and get the story. But if the sound in Sway is what you want, and that's where you're at, and you want to know where to go next, not just what to listen to next, but where to go next in life, what that next step is that makes sense, listen in order. The next one is home, and keep going in order. But if you're at that point where you're transitioning and just figuring it out, or you're still in it, start at the beginning. Consent to treatment. Not the answers, then consent to treatment. History for sale. Foiled, approaching normal. Any man in America. Hit Sway, and you'll know that no matter what it is, how deep the shit is, still pull yourself out of it. And then keep going, because there's more to do.
Okay, so basically just listen to everything.
And like I said, it tells a life story. Do you open a biography to the middle? Because that's what it is. You're listening to a biography in musical form over 20 plus years.
Okay. That'd be interesting. I might go back and have a listen to some of that. I'm quite interested. I'm definitely interested to listen to that, particularly in the context of this album anyway, as I said before. But yeah, so that's basically, yeah, as I said, listen to it in order. So we're here now at the very important, the key question of this podcast, which is the song for the Spotify Hall of Fame playlist. Now, if anyone's not listened to this, before, what this means, I'm going to ask Rahl to choose one song off this album to be immortalised forever on the Spotify Hall of Fame playlist. I can't veto it. Whatever he says goes. So, Rahl, what song are you going to stick onto the playlist?
Even though it's not for me, this is a community playlist, and I want to do some community good. Put Fear on there.
Okay, I'm going to stick Fear onto the playlist, joining They Might Be Giants and the Wonder Stuff.
Your They Might Be Giants episode was wonderful, by the way. That was a great listen.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so that was the previous episode. Because I'm suddenly recording these very, very close to air date. Yeah, so that becomes mechanically the 118th song, even though it technically isn't, on that playlist. And that's it. We're at the end of our conversation. And before we go, Rahl, where can people find you if they want to follow you on the internet?
Well, I would say if you want to hear more of my goofy voice and you want to hear more video game talk, I have a network of podcasts which has been unfortunately on hiatus due to a number of reasons. But we are working on getting the wheels put back on. The World 1-1 podcast, one RSS feed for all the shows in the network. So you find one, you found them all. Which there are a number, but we're working on getting the wheels back on the main show, and going to progress to bringing back some of the others, like I'd Play That for $1, Phazon Labs. My wife does one on there called Mind Over Media, which is talking about, connecting mental health issues to TV, music, games, movies. She actually uploaded the last episode of anything on our feed. So that's the most recent thing on there. But like I said, you'll find all the shows on there nice and easily labeled. But that way, if you find one, you found them all. So convenient. But outside of that, if you go into any of the show notes on our podcast, you'll find, the assorted Twitters and links to our teeny tiny Discord and all that fun stuff. But if it's your jam, and you're enjoying it, please reach out, ping us, let us know. It's nice to talk to some people.
Okay, yeah. So I'm have to have a venture over and I'll look and see some of the song on the World 1-1. Is it World and written 1-1 or
World
just...
1-1, just like the very beginning of Mario. The
got
game
you.
starts here.
So that's where the name's from.
So, but we try, and it's grown and evolved over the years, but we try and present a more than the normal skin deep video game stuff. We try and really dig into the meat and look at the parts and in the ways that nobody else does, which is, we're here not just to give you a quick dopamine hit of here's the news clips of the week, but here are topics that matter, and here's why, and here's a different way to think about them going forward, which is why the network slogan became press start to engage your mind.
Okay. Yes, I think I've just found the master feed now on Podbean.
That's us.
Yeah. Yeah, I got
Been
it.
around
So,
for about 7 years. Episode 4, I was missing because my daughter was born. So it's easy to keep track.
Well, gosh, the cheek of her to interrupt the podcast schedule. I can say that I don't have children, so I don't know. But no, yeah, go and have a check out for World 1, and I look forward to seeing them slowly come back into releasing stuff. So yeah, and there we are, definitely at the end of our chat now, Rahl. It's been an absolute pleasure chatting to you. I absolutely loved the live stories they've got, and you can't see this. This is about, I'm assuming, are you showing me some tattoos?
It reads
I'm
Blue
guessing
October
those are
written across 4 of the album covers that are personal to me.
Okay, yeah, and I'm assuming that's Sway on the right.
Sway at the end.
Yeah.
Consent to treatment,
okay.
foiled, approaching normal, Sway. And that part was actually put together from photos that I took at some of the shows about 9 years ago.
Wow.
And that was him doodling his record label logo on the back of my hand for me to finish the arm off.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. So, yeah. Listeners, that was great content for an audio medium, but yeah. So you had like on your hand, you got the logo,
the hard
thing, which I think you should be able to catch a glimpse of it on the artwork, because you sent me a photo and you said there was a so you
can see it on the back of my hand.
Yeah. So So thanks for introducing me to a band that you kind of sort of like. So
only a little.
Only just a tiny bit. But yeah, thank you ever so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me. If I haven't put you off, I'd love to do it again.
Oh yeah, I'd love to have you back at some point in the future. But
get World 1-1, rolling again, man. Come join us.
Oh yeah, I'll accept that invitation, mate. No worries. But thank you ever so much.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure, man.
You've been listening to Pick a Disc, and I've been your host, Matthew Latham. Our theme music is Pump by Kevin MacLeod of Incompetech.com. Pick a Disc is hosted by the We Made This podcast network, and you can find them on www.spreaker.com/user/We Made This. You can find the Pick a Disc show site on www.spreaker.com/show/pickadisc. You can find us on all the usual social media type places like Facebook, Instagram, Twitter under Pick a Disc. You can also email us on pickadisc@gmail.com. Until next time, happy listening to all those discs that you are picking. Goodbye.
Do you like pop culture and top 10 lists? If you do, then step inside the Den of 10. In the Den, we have countless top 10 lists to captivate and titillate even the weariest soul. We've got lists of films.
And there's that famous thing about the scene where he improvised his way through smashing his hand and cutting his hand open on the glass as he banged his hand on the table.
Yeah.
I mean, you can't really say boo to that.
Music.
The rest of the song is like just a swirling crescendo of clever songwriting, amazing singing, great drumming, like beautiful guitar effects.
Video games.
And I think that's exactly what happened with Zelda. It was everything, looking back, is on a much lower resolution to what we see in Breath of the Wild. But as I was playing it, I just felt like my imagination was just going absolutely wild.
TV. This is where sitcom verges on the cinematic. still in a neat 20 minutes. And the interaction between these vastly different characters is so well realised. And more. Listen to us on all major podcast providers. Find us on Twitter @10of10pod, where you can like, follow, comment, and vote. Or find us on the We Made This Podcast network at wemadethisnetwork.com. We hope to see you soon in the Den of 10.